Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Parallel Stories podcast. On the heels of last week being super improv and comedic and up in the clouds, I thought I'd be more grounded for this episode. And who better to do that with than a yoga instructor?
Hello, everybody.
Cue intro. So now I'm going to do the intro and cut that in. And we're back. So yes, this is my stepmom, Trish. I say stepmom. Her and my dad have been together for what, like 11, 12?
Almost 15 years.
15 years. God, that's so long.
I'm glad it seems shorter.
Yes. They're not actually married. So it's kind of like how me, my dad, my brother call you Trish, even though everyone else calls you Trisha. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like the multiple ways that this family is very unique and does things differently. But she is a yoga instructor, as the stereotypes in movie and film. I did hate her at first, but since have come around to her. We have a lot in common and not so much in common. I think we're both like a little crazy, just a little bit.
Well, I think we live a lot in our heads, both of us. And I'm so much older, so that's the thing. I think if I was your age, we'd probably be a lot more alike.
Yeah.
And I'm, it's just a lot of years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She's 40 years older than me. She's 63. 40. That's so much. That's so much, but you've like lived this completely other life. I mean, you were born before the Civil Rights Act was signed.
Correct.
Which I think is like insane.
Yep.
And she's also the youngest of 8. So really big family. Mm-hmm. So I want to cover some things in like the past versus how things are now. Because like you said, I'm very in my head. I'm also very modern, Gen Z, love the modern age. So I want to give a picture. So when you were 10, describe your day to me on like a weekend, or maybe it's the summer, school's out.
Well, when I was 10, we just moved into the suburbs.
Oh, okay.
So that summer, we moved to Northbrook from the actual northwest side of Chicago. So I was kind of uptight because I was going to a new school and I didn't know what it would be like. And, but there was a lot of room. And as I've told you before, I like to be outside a lot. And my mom would always be like, you're going outside. It was not an option for us to stay in. So
back then there were only like 3 TV channels, so might as well go outside.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, we did. I mean, we'd come in to watch like Dick Van Dyke, and then, but we would go out and play jump rope and hide and seek and all that stuff with the neighborhood kids, because I hadn't really established my core group of friends yet. But
so where were you living before that?
We lived in Sauganash, which is a neighborhood on the northwest side of Chicago. Pretty nice neighborhood. And I have 7 older siblings, and I was 5 years from my next sister, so I was a surprise. So my parents were ready to leave the city, and I didn't really want to because I wanted to grow up. I wanted to do everything my siblings did.
Yeah.
And so when we moved, it was like, oh no, what's this going to be like? But like I said, there were trees in the backyard. There was a lot more room. It was very expansive. So it was good. But again, I was nervous because I was going to a new school and I didn't know anybody. And I was I would say I was pretty controlled about my stuff, like, pencils and paper.
Don't want your 7 siblings taking anything of yours.
And socks. It was weird. We had a lot of territorial stuff because my next 3 siblings are sisters. So we were always like socks and shirts, and everything was very much, this is mine. And so it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, because by 10, you probably had a couple of siblings who were like in college or just like off.
Yes. And in fact, my eldest brother, Tom, was 18 when I was born. So he was heading up to college. I was born in May. He turned 18 in June and headed to college in September.
So what are your memories of like Christmas break or whatever when all the siblings were in the house together?
It was a lot of music. We were very musical. My mom was a musician. My siblings are musicians. We all sang, and all my cousins had instruments and were singing all the time in parties. And so it was just kind of like a lot of fun, a lot of activity. We were always doing stuff. And we had a lot of fun, a lot of movement. It was not a lot of stagnant. We were moving all the time, softball. And then of course we had the cottage. So I was water skiing by the time I was 8. I kind of, as the youngest, was expected to do everything. They were like, come on. You can do
just
it.
Tagging along.
Yeah, and even if I didn't want to do it, I always felt compelled to do it because, I was the youngest, and like I said, I kind of wanted to be like everybody else. But but I was also very coordinated. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of coming full circle into yoga. Mm-hmm. And my dad did yoga when I was young.
He did?
Yeah.
Her dad was a judge. Mm-hmm. When I think of your dad, I think of the judge in To Kill a Mockingbird, just like eating his cigar. Did he ever wear a fedora?
He wore hats, yeah.
Okay.
And he was a pretty good looking guy. Mm-hmm. He never smoked cigars by the time I was around, at least. He was very stoic and very sober like a judge, but he was also had this very much, this nurturing, like very earthy. He liked to plant tomatoes and trees. And he was very steady and grounded. Your dad kind of reminds me in some ways of my dad.
Oh, the infamous reliable. Having your partner be like your parent.
Yeah. But then again, like Elliot, your dad, he's, completely different. Mm-hmm. Half of him is completely different, artistic. But half of him, yeah. Mm-hmm. And my dad was, he couldn't really explore that because he had 8 kids to take care of.
Yeah.
But his dad before him was a judge also.
So when the Brady Brunch premiered, because I think that was in the 60s, were you like, 6 children, how about 8? How about you take the camera crew and film my household for a day? Because that's even more chaotic.
Yeah. Well, and it was interesting because it was, there was a lot of hippies in the neighborhood and hippiedom was starting. Yeah, my sisters were in college. So once they went off to college, it was kind of crazy and they were wild and free and into all kinds of great music. But so I always felt kind of removed. So I'm 5 years from my next sister. And then my eldest brother had his first child when I was only 5, almost 6. So my nephew and my first sister are kind of the same number of years on either side of me. So I always kind of felt like a bridge. Mm-hmm. I felt like I was connected, but in some ways not connected to either group. Mm-hmm. So it was interesting there. But my dad, he was... He and my mom were polar opposites. As you know, Sis was pretty spiky and spunky.
And very spiky to me when she was still alive. Yeah. May she rest in peace. But she was very mean to me.
Yeah, she was a bitch.
Yeah.
She was a bitch to certain people. Like everybody, I have 17 nephews and nieces. And there was always one person in each family that Sis had a problem with. And you got the honor on that.
And I did nothing to deserve it.
No, he did not.
No.
But she was, she was pretty territorial with me because I was her baby. Mm-hmm. And when Elliot first came in, she was like, wait, she's mine. I need her. So, but then she discovered how great he was. And so, yep. My dad did yoga. So I would come down in the morning. He'd be standing on his head. Yep. He's
trying to collect his thoughts for the big trial.
He was good. I mean, he was a big guy and he did probably a half hour, 40 minutes of yoga every morning. Wow. So it was in my blood. My mom was very into diet and my dad was very into health. They were both very healthy. So we kind of got the whole, that's why I am the way I am.
I was not like that. That by the time she and my dad met, I was already down like this sugary garbage pipeline, and they still cannot rescue me no matter how hard they try or I try to have a healthier diet.
You're better.
Because I have to be. I'm getting into the 20s where like I have to be healthier, otherwise my body feels bad and my poops are really awful.
Well, wait until you get to be my age, you will be forced. It's like, okay, you have to do certain things, otherwise you feel like shit all the time.
Yeah, I already feel like that. I need to do the lower back exercises or the shoulder exercises even now.
Use your bolster.
Hate it. When did you start finding yourself? Because I know who I am very much by now. I only had one older sibling, Skylar, and he's 5 years older than me. So by the time I was in my formative years, he was already off in college. So I was basically an only child. Mm-hmm. Something I realized while on this trip here right now, a little vacation, Christmas break vacation, is that I know who I am. I just haven't found the people I fit in with, at least in this age. Back in high school, like I've mentioned, my friend group was really great, like my junior year. But now when I'm like trying to get more friends, but now I'm going to move. So I'm like quitting the little mission I had to be more social because I'll just wait for when I like move further west. When did you start to discover who you were kind of like outside of your siblings?
It's funny looking at it from this point now because last year, I do. Okay. I feel like really it's been just this progression of realization. Like I got into yoga. I was married for a long time, as you know.
Yes.
And Elliot and I were both married long term.
Yeah, that's why they did not do the marriage thing again, because they were been there, done yet.
Yeah. And we're very committed. I mean, we don't.
People don't do the marriage thing anymore.
Yeah, and for us, it's like, I don't know. It doesn't feel right now. Who knows what will happen. But when I got divorced, that was a big piece because that was 2006.
Wow. And I was 5 years old.
Yeah, and I had been with Tom for 19 years. Mm-hmm. So we were married for 16. So I just kind of was like, I felt like when I became a wife, no offense to the wives out there, but it just wasn't a good fit for me. I didn't like people telling me what to do. I was very independent. I just didn't fit in that role. We tried to have kids, but we couldn't. Mm-hmm. I went through 4 rounds of IVF.
You did? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow. And then came me and my brother. So there you
go. So now I have Ryder and Skylar. But, you know, it was tough, but it was freeing. It was liberating. I kind of felt like I wanted to stay there because it felt safe, and I knew, even though it wasn't great, I knew what it was, so it felt familiar. But when I was kind of forced to leave, and without getting into that, because that's a whole nother story, but it was time for me to go, and it was time for us to split. Yeah. Tom was a great guy, but we weren't working anymore. And that was the time, because then I was like, okay, who am I without this other template that was all my families? Everybody got, get married, you have kids, you hopefully have a nice house in the suburbs.
Yeah, very nuclear family.
Yeah, I didn't do that. I was like, okay, what am I going to do? So I ended up I was also a massage therapist. I left the finance world in Chicago.
You were in finance?
I worked at the Merck for 9 years.
She was in finance?
Yeah. Well, I had that kind of brain, but I didn't like it. So, and plus it was kind of a job I didn't know what to do. I was like, all right, I'll go down to the Merck. Then I got into massage therapy and healing, and that suited me much better. So about 2006, when I left, I was like, I really wanted to get into yoga, and that's when I started exploring yoga. Yeah. And it was about 10 years later when I got certified. And I stopped doing massage and started teaching, and I do, I write a lot. I haven't put anything out there, but I'm
plug your website. You have a website, right?
Yeah, my website is triciaschwaba.com. It's TRICIASCHWABA.
See, Trisha and not Trish.
Yeah.
This family
it was started out confusing. My real name is Patricia. My teachers when I was young called me Patty. I'm like, no, it's Trisha, and then everybody calls me Trish, and I'm like, very confusing.
Multiple names.
Yes, multiple identities.
Yeah.
So once I got into yoga, it really helped me take all that energy that we've talked about, a lot of energy up here, and it brought me into more grounded existence. And then when I started teaching, I've always felt like a fake in my life, like, oh, I'm just faking it.
The imposter syndrome.
The imposter syndrome. And it's literally just been recently that I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a pretty good teacher. And all my students love me.
I would say you're a good teacher.
What?
I would say you're a good teacher.
I know, but it's that core of insecurity that just kind of has never left me. Yeah. Even though now, I say it's funny because now I'm in my 60s and everybody's retiring, and I kind of feel like, wait, I just figured that things out,
And you're so youthful too. I can't really imagine you retiring. I swear, she's 40 years older than me, and probably by every metric of health, if we both got lab tests right now, hers would be better than mine.
Well, that's another genetic thing. I got lucky in my family because we did move a lot and we ate really well, so that helped. But we got pretty good genes as far as that goes. I mean, who knows, right? You never know. But,
you don't sleep well, but who needs to sleep?
I'm getting better though.
You are? Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting better. Yeah, and so I don't know. I mean, I've never done the conforming path. It just didn't fit for me. You don't make a lot of money being a massage therapist and a yoga instructor and a hopeful, writer to put some work out there someday, but it's not a lot of money, but it's helped me ground and stay healthier. Yeah. So I made the choice to say, okay, I'm not going to take this, but I'm going to do what I kind of felt I followed my intuitive sense more than anything. Yeah.
It's funny to hear all that because I'm 23, as we talked about. From my very first episode of this podcast, I'm drifting off to somewhere else. I'm in my 20s because every 20-something has no idea what they're doing. I've been talking about how I'm in apparently this 12th house perfection year with my astrology, and Libra is the ruler of the 12th house. And the 12th house is about like loneliness, isolation, blah, blah, blah. And then Libra is about justice. So I experienced the injustice with the firing, which really put me off that course. It was so shocking. And I was like, okay, I'm going to move. I'm going to have this whole big change. And I hope that when I'm 24, which apparently the astrologists on Reddit say is when things start picking up and start being good again, then it's going to be good. But it really is the truth that you go through the different phases in your life. And it's like this ebb and flow of like feeling good about life and feeling not so good, because you can try your hardest, but like things are still going to happen because there's so much that's outside of your control.
And I would ask you, like, the fact that happened, I'm wondering if you would be doing this now. You probably would eventually do it, but maybe it wouldn't have come as soon, like doing your podcast. And so I feel like when I've observed you, that you are more authentically yourself today than I've ever seen you. And of course, that makes sense. But I think that shift, when that happened, I told your dad, I was like, this is going to be interesting in a good way.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's just like me being pushed out of my marriage. I was like, but then when I did, I went on this path and I met your dad, and now I have this great relationship that's very equitable and very loving, and we both do whatever we want. And I think for you making that shift, whether you wanted to or not, I just see it's good things. Yeah. Good things are coming from it, even if it sucked.
I mean, I've always wanted to be stable and put pressure on myself to be stable, especially financially, because my parents have gone through their ups and downs. So for me, like getting a full-time job, I was like, I have to do this. And like being stable, having my own health insurance, things like that. So if I hadn't been fired, I definitely would have stuck with that. And I like that you say I'm being more authentic, because the whole thing, the core of it was such an attack on my character. Whether they truly believe that I was like this bad person or not, that's the reason they fired me. And so I've had to keep reminding myself of like, I'm not that person that they saw me. I know who I am, and they might have this impression of me, and they may have had the power in that situation, but I can always stand firm with who I know myself to be.
And that is such a gift. That is such a profound gift, what you're saying, because that feeds into every other area in your life. So when you get into your relationships moving forward, the whole incident, I think, is just that whole piece, that authentic piece, feeds into everything. I mean, it really does.
I want that relationship. That's still like out of the key parts of being like a human person. I feel like the romantic relationship one is something I'm missing out on so much, and I get so existential about it. And it really does suck.
Yeah, but I'm going to counter that a little bit, because, and I'm not saying your feelings aren't valid, absolutely. But it's, when I think of my meeting my ex-husband, didn't happen until I was 26. And then when I met your dad, I was in my 40s. So, I think the different perspectives from where we are, me being older, you being younger, what I want to say to every young person is, my God, yeah, sorry. You got time in your 20s. You feel like you're getting older, but every decade that you go through, you look back and you're like, wow, I had a lot of time back then. So, and it's lost. You don't know it until you're in it. But I'm assuring you that relationship is coming. I feel it for you. And I think it's going to be really great because you've gone through all this. I think it's just going to be that much more enhanced.
Yeah, hopefully in the new state, it will be better, because where I live now, everyone's ugly and stupid. And not to perpetuate the stereotype that people in the South are dumb, especially because there's a lot of politics around the education and underfunding and the Republican leaders not believing in education. But oh my God, the fact that I would be like half these people's ages or less than half and know more than them and be smarter than them. Like, I hate that. And Trixie Mattel, drag queen, friend of the pod, just kidding, she's not. That's what she says on her podcast when someone calls in, they'll say like friend of the pod. But she says that if you're the smartest person in the room, you'll never learn anything. And that's kind of what was happening. So hopefully where I go now, there will be people who are more
Now allow me to push back a little
without being too egotistical, but oh my God, seriously, these people were just like, they weren't with it. They didn't have the
411. It's territories too, because like we live now in Asheville, and like Asheville's the South, but it is pretty cool, and there's so many cool people here. So that's what I'm saying. With pockets, you can find pockets in the South, is my guess. I'm still learning, but where you can have a very progressive type of population, and then you go 10 miles out, and you're like, what the fuck? You know, what is going on here? So
I think it was just especially still leaning down, and you have noticed that in the last podcast too. I still cannot figure out the sleeping thing with my computer, but I will be working on it. I do have a ring light now, tripod combo, and microphones courtesy of my wonderful father. Yes. So we are making updates, and I did figure out how to hook up my phone to my computer to use it as a webcam. It was a whole thing with file transfer stuff. I won't get into it, but I think it was just in the pockets I was in of like the jobs I was in. And like I said before, my first job out of college, I really liked the people I was working with directly, my coworkers. It was other people who I encountered outside of that company, like on the meetings and stuff, where it was just like, what is going on? Like there was one meeting where, and this was so frustrating because my boss's boss would always tell us to be professional. We have to be professional because she came from the corporate world. And then she was in nonprofit, and in nonprofit, like anything goes because you're not getting paid a lot. So anything goes. But there was one Zoom meeting, and this was a work meeting. This was for work with different community partners and stuff, where the women were lighting up the chat and they were talking about different things. And then someone brought up the Kelsey brothers, and someone said, I think I like Jason Kelsey more because of his dad bod. And I was like, this is a work meeting. What are you talking? I had to like take a moment with myself to be like why? Like what is going on? Why are you talking about this? And then in the second job, the people who fired me, I mean, it was constantly like the two like girls I was working with, how they were constantly being like the upper management is stupid, and I was witnessing that firsthand. So I'm like, it really like, this is one of the things that irks me. Like I remember being in my pharmacy waiting for my medication refill and literally Googling how to be less like mad about the world and how to be less like righteous. And someone on Reddit was like, you just have to remember that the world is messy and things aren't going to be perfect. But I think dumb people having any sort of power in a malicious way, especially, is something that irks me the most.
Yeah, I know. Well, and it's exactly why I knew I had to do my own thing because, you know, I was down at the Merck and it was a lot, you know, that was in the late 80s, 90s. So it was a lot of testosterone and yeah, but my point is too that so I always had to take my own path because I didn't like to deal with that either, Ryder. I didn't like it at all, and I was not good at dealing with it. So I took myself out of there, which I don't know if it was good or bad. Who knows? I think it's pretty good now.
Yeah, I think it worked out.
But the point is, I think when there's that corporate structure and there's this person at the top telling everybody how they have to act, that's tough. And that's what a lot of the work structure is in this country. But if you get out on your own or you find a good place, I think it makes a big difference. And that's another reason I felt freer, because I didn't like stupid people telling me to do stupid things where it didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you feel that way too.
Yeah. I hope I can look back on these episodes one day from like a point of having any sort of notoriety and getting like brand sponsorships and being able to actually do this for a living. Because there is a trend, especially with modern influencers, of like, they got fired and that's the reason they started doing social media, and it worked out. Like there's one, Brittany Broski, who I've mentioned before, friend of the pod, I wish. She was working at an insurance job in Texas. Now, of course, she lives in LA and she's doing super well and amazing. And there's this one meme of her trying kombucha, the drink, and just the way she was so expressive about it, it just went viral, and like gay Twitter picked it up, and just like it was getting picked up so much. And her boss took her in and was like, either you have to like delete your online presence or we're going to fire you. And of course, Brittany was like, well, just like fire me. Like Brittany wasn't going to take that. And now she's like super famous.
Yeah.
So it works out.
Exactly. And I think we get pushes like that. I mean, I feel like they're pushes or nudges. And sometimes it's out and out throwing you, right? But I do think that takes you into an uncomfortable space of what the hell am I going to do? Or, oh my God, this is terrible. But then you go through it and you grow, right? That's how you grow. Yeah.
So we were talking about the other day that you said something that really stuck with me. You said because it was yesterday, I said, like, I just don't think my brain is fit for meditation. It's so active, and like, you figured it out, but you've been in it for years.
Yeah.
And you said maybe like I'm just not at the right moment for it.
Right.
So I want to ask you, where were you when you were like 23 transitioning into 24? Because if the astrologists on Reddit are right, and I'm about to have a much better life in 24 come June, and come the next year, it's New Year's Eve when we're filming this. What was going on in your life?
Well, that's probably when, let me think, 24. That's right before I was singing in a band. By the way. Yeah, my sister and brother and I had a band. So we were in a band for a year and a half. And then I was like, okay, they kind of dragged me into that too.
Okay.
And then after that, but it was fun. And then after that, I found my Merc job. And my Merc job was really fun for a while. So I was transitioning into adulthood where I was like, oh my God, I have a job. The pay was great. I had a pretty good time.
What was the pay? I want to know what the pay was.
God,
what was the year?
I remember. It would have been the mid to late 80s.
Okay.
And I think I was making like $25,000 a year. Which doesn't sound like a lot, but
I was expecting it to be like 45, and I'd be pissed that like in 2024, coming in 2025, I'll be making 45K, but
it might have been up to 30, but in that time.
Do you remember what your rent was?
Well, when I started, I was living at home still.
Okay.
And then we got a house. I got a house with a couple of friends, and I want to say it was $300 a month for a house for each of us. So it wasn't even.
Oh, for each of you?
Yeah.
So it was $900 total.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was but it was a house.
Yeah.
I mean,
one of my coworkers, she had before she moved in with her husband, she was living with like a few roommates, and her rent was like $230 for a house. Was yours was it like a good area?
I could have. Yeah, it was in Northbrook, and they didn't have houses for rent, so.
Northbrook?
Yeah.
Damn.
I know. So, and I took the train down to work. And then, okay, you're asking me when things transition. This is all coming back into my head now. I got my goal was to have my own apartment in the city. Okay. I got my job at the Merc, went to the city, had a great apartment on Wolfram Avenue. It was a 1-bedroom, and it was gorgeous. Third
floor, did it have in-unit laundry?
It did.
Wow,
no,
okay.
I'm sorry. Did it? No, it had in the building laundry.
Okay.
It did not have in-unit.
Okay.
Yeah, not very common back then, but to have in-unit laundry.
Yeah, there was.
But I was on my own, and that was great. And then I got married. Sorry.
It's so funny that like things keep slapping me in the face, because like I am very smart, but I'm also very naive at certain times. And there are like certain words or phrases that will hit me. It's so funny that you say like transition period, because that's what I'm in now. And I very famously hate transition periods because I hate waiting. Yeah. And I just want the next phase to just come up. So with me, with this like 3 to 4 month stretch of this new job and like finally moving, like I'm going to try to not be miserable, but in the back of my mind, the whole time I'm going to think I'm just waiting and waiting. I'm just waiting in line. Right. And I hate waiting.
Yeah. Well, and going back to what you said that I mentioned the other day was, that's the thing. When I was 23, I was not doing yoga. I thought my dad was crazy. I'm like, Dad, what the hell?
I also think you're crazy. I'm yoga is good, even though I can't. I did get a yoga mat. There was like a solid month where I was doing it kind of regularly, and then I got fired, and then like other stuff, and then visited my mom and all that. So I kind of fell off my routine. I'm going to try to get back into it.
Well, and the other thing to remember for everybody is that yoga is not just poses. Yoga is breathing deeply. Yoga is moving through your life with grace. Yoga is eating good food, but also having fun. And so it's a whole thing. Like people always think of, I'm on the mat and I'm doing poses. Those are the asanas, but there's a lot of other things.
Okay, so you just said that checklist in my mind. I was like, nope, not doing any of those things.
But when we were talking about it at the restaurant, when you're 23, when I was 23, I wasn't doing yoga. I didn't do it till 20 years later. So point being that when you're not feeling it right now, in 10 years, you might be like, oh, I'm going to go to yoga class and it'll be great. If you don't like it right now, don't do it. You shouldn't really push yourself into something you hate, but the doors might open down the road where you're like, oh, I hated that 10 years ago, but now I'm ready. And maybe you're ready to breathe more deeply. Maybe you're ready to move more completely through your range of motion in your physical body. There's all these factors that come into it. So be patient and don't, again, it's all opening up whether we want it to or not. We think we have control. And what I've learned is we only have a modicum of control, if that's the right way to say it.
I'm just going to let that flow above my head and not through my ears because I need my control.
But
Trixie
I get it. But you're going to
mm-hmm.
also learn as you get older, which I think wisdom is, with aging,
mm-hmm.
is like that we do have control over a lot of things, but sometimes that urge to control can restrict other things
mm-hmm.
from flowing into our lives. And I think as I've aged, I've realized that. Like, quit worrying so much,
Trixie Mattel also said, because she was a runner and then she got a stress-induced autoimmune disorder that caused some arthritis. Rest in peace, just kidding. She's not dead. And she's getting better because she took a sabbatical. But she was talking about how when she was running, she was training for a marathon. She was talking to this guy and she told him, I wish I'd started when I was younger, because she was like in her 30s at that point. And he told her, like, most people don't start young and they start later because they need the discipline.
Yes. And something will push you. Whether it's an injury or whatever, something will push you usually. That's what I found because I was a massage therapist for so long and I worked on so many people. A lot of times it's like, oh my God, I have this injury or I have this situation and I can't deal with it. And it pushes you towards healthy things. Everybody should breathe deeply because it's a good thing to do. You don't have to go to yoga class to breathe deeply, but you can take a minute out of your day, a few times a day, and you can breathe deeply and it really, it serves you. But yeah, I think you have to. I wish that I had started yoga when I was your age. That's why I would love to see you do it because I've known the benefits, but I also understand why it doesn't work for everybody at 23.
Yeah.
It's a slow discipline that it takes a while.
But I like that I can do it in my home because I hate leaving my home. So that's easy, especially in the winter when it's cold and cloudy and awful and disgusting out. It's a workout I can do.
Not in Las Vegas.
Because despite what you say about going out in the cold, and back when they lived on a lake. Good for you to go into
all different temperatures outside. It's good for the system.
Back when they lived on a lake, and Trish would say, if you jump in the freezing cold water and give yourself hypothermia, it will add years to your life. I am simply not a believer in that. And going out in the cold when it's 30 degrees and it's cloudy and there's a wind and it's like giving frostbite to my ears, I don't love that. It's nice to have something I can do in the comfort and temperature controlled protection of my own apartment.
Right. And just about fresh air. That's my big thing. Yeah. Even if you're in a room and you can open the windows and get that fresh air flowing, because we're in this air conditioning heat all the time. So, I mean, I'm a firm believer in that. I think that's another reason that I've stayed relatively healthy is the fresh air. Not even if you're just sitting outside, you don't want to walk around, but just let it hit you once in a while. I think it's really good.
I think there's something about me that I try to be with nature and it doesn't, because like I said, very Gen Z, very modern, and Gen Z is all about on the phones, on the screens. We don't get sunlight, we get blue light, we rot in bed, we don't socialize, we don't do any of that. We've been harmed by all these different things going on in the world, and we just don't want to do anything, and we just want to sit in our beds and watch TV all day. At least that's me.
I like that too, though.
So growing up without the technology, and now there is the technology, because she's not a hypocrite. She does use technology, but talk to me about that huge shift. I mean, it was gradual, but I've only ever known technology, and that was not the case for you.
No, and you know what? I love technology. I love this. I like streaming. You know me. I can watch a lot of TV. Or streaming services.
And no commercials, because she hates commercials. Miss Spoiled with Prime now adding ads. She's spoiled and she hates the commercials.
I get angry.
Yeah,
I really do. But what the big difference for me was, like I said, my mom was a freak about get outside. We were not allowed inside. So, and then we had the cottage up north in northern Wisconsin. So we were in the lake all day. So we weren't in front of the screen. So I think that was a gift from my perspective. But I also understand the beauty of technology and bringing the world together and connecting people who never would have been connected. But I do think, given that I am a wellness person, and that's what I know, is that it's that focus of here, right? I'm all this focus here. I think for me, I got to keep reminding myself to look around and go out of that little zone. And I think that's the biggest piece that I see is it can literally grab you and pull you in. You just have to I have to make sure for myself that it doesn't control me. If that makes sense.
I think the biggest change and the one that creates a lot of anxiety is the always being available. And Absolutely. I've been trying to help this with my own life of like putting my phone on vibrate or putting it on do not disturb and just trying to like, if I get a missed call, who cares? Because no one's calling me for emergencies.
Right.
No one's calling me for anything. So I don't
Right.
need to pick
Until
it up.
you're a parent.
Yeah,
really.
Which is never going to happen. So I don't have to worry about that. But like the always being available, and they talk about this in the workforce a lot of like still being available even when you go home, and like there might be new laws that might come out in some countries of like the right to disconnect, and of course some CEOs don't like that because they suck, but they even in the job I'm about to get of like, it's such a double-edged sword with flexible hours, because on one hand, it's like, oh, I can go to an appointment in the middle of the day because like many medical places are only open from like 9 to 5, or I can get groceries when it's not super busy, like in the morning, and it's not a problem. But at the same time, it's like, are they going to treat me like I'm always available? And if so, I'm going to have to put up those boundaries and be like, I'm configuring my work schedule. I'm not available right now, even though you are. Like I've been seeing, when I did have a job, I would see in the email signature, it would be like self-care note. There is no expectation for you to reply to this email outside of your working hours. And I'm like, it's crazy that people even have to like put that somewhere, that even has to be said. I mean, I always like to respond to emails as fast as I can, but then again, I was never like super busy at those jobs, so I would be able to do that. But you experienced in adolescence and a young adulthood of like going out with your friends and like no cell phone.
No cell phone, and we had a phone and it rang. Like I don't even know how we did it back then.
And no caller ID. You had no idea who was calling you.
But you know, I was the last of 8. My poor parents. I mean, I can't imagine with 4 girls at the end. You know, the phone was just crazy. But
Johnny's calling. I need to get. It could be my crush.
And but we, you know, I had a really good group of friends, and we went out a lot, and we socialized a lot. But one thing I want to before I forget, I love that you said self-care, because for me, my motto and what I tell people and my students is, self-care is healthcare. We tend to think of healthcare as just what goes on in the hospital and the doctor, but it's all healthcare because we're caring for our overall holistic health. But yeah, it was crazy back then with the phone. I honestly can't really remember. I was lucky because I was the only one left, so I had access to the phone, but I'm sure it drove my parents crazy. I mean, I don't even know. And then we would, you know, when I was in college, I worked in a bar, and it would be like the little party.
Are you drawing lines of cocaine?
No, I didn't. I was never into cocaine. Only weed smoker, and I was a frisbee player and a hacky sack player. So you're seeing the pattern, right?
But not in this state because it's not legal.
No, true. But like we would that's how we communicated. Going to the bar, where's the parties after close, and we would go out that way. We wouldn't have the text. So, but I do think, you know, you work with what you have, and now you guys, your age, and we all have it. But I think it's great to say, like, this whole notion that you should be available all the time. That means your availability, you're putting yourself after, you know, your work, and that is depleting horribly. So the fact that a boss would want you to do that makes no sense to me, because why would you want a depleted employee?
Yeah, it's dumb. Yeah. And with me, it feels like, even like outside of work and just personal life, which like no one's contacting me all the time. There will be days where like, because again, speaking about the loneliness, there are days, it's not super often. It's like once every 2 weeks where like, I will not have talked to anyone in any way. No phone call, no text message, no like drive through, like nothing, like no communication of any kind, just like being in my home. But when it feels kind of like Big Brother of like someone like could call me and I can get my ringtone, which I love my ringtone. It's the Sabrina the Teenage Witch during season 5, that theme song, which I really like. But and I've had it for like years. But every time my phone ringtone goes off my call, I like get startled and jump because it's like loud.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my God. And it just feels like anyone could like text me at any time, or like Amazon, or like send me a notification, or just like an email, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm trying to rest and my phone's vibrating. I hate this.
I was going to ask you, do you like it? Do you like that 2 weeks with not communicating?
I think in the grand scheme of the loneliness, it sucks. I don't think it happens often enough. And this was mostly during like my unemployment, my like recent unemployment. If I'm going to start working again, then like, of course, I'm going to have more socialization going on. But it's funny, like the day will end and I'll be like, should I just like text someone? Because like it feels like odd that I will like not have communicated with anyone in any way. It feels very weird. But I do want to ask you, because in the TV shows, whenever someone asks for someone else's number, or they'll say like, oh, I'll call you, but there's no exchanging of numbers. So when you were talking to people in your like young adulthood and you were exchanging numbers, how did you exchange numbers? Was it writing on the hand? Was it getting the ink poisoning through the hand?
You know, I don't ever remember writing on my hand. Yeah, it was more like we didn't have sticky notes.
Post-it notes hadn't been invented yet.
Or a piece of paper, and that would be it. Or I'm trying to think. Now that you're asking me the question, I'm like, oh my god, what did we do? But I think I don't ever remember writing on the hand, but I do remember paper. Yeah, phone number. And like I didn't really, when I was out at the bars, I would be with my girlfriends, or I was with a guy, maybe a date. I didn't really date that much, but it would just be like groups. Yeah. You know, and I'm trying to think of how many of them. I did a lot of, you know, the dates or hookups, not necessarily sexting, but, you know, just like connections. I didn't really, it wasn't like, oh, he's calling me for a date. It was just kind of free form for me, and it always was. Yeah. For better or for worse.
I remember there was an episode of Full House where the main plot was that DJ wanted her own phone line. Did you ever have like your own phone line, or was there more than one in your household?
Yes. Okay. My dad finally got a second line.
And it was $200 a month. Okay.
Well, that's funny because I remember the number. It was PA 56114. Palisades 5. That's how numbers were back then. It was PA 56114. Sorry if anybody else has that number now. But yeah, and then we got like 6115 was the second line, and it was a big deal. And then about a year later, probably like a year later, we moved to Northbrook. And then that changed everything. My siblings were kind of pissed off about that.
Was there the area code thing? Because I know in Hollywood they do the 555 because they don't want to accidentally give out someone's actual number, but they never give out the area code.
We didn't have to use it because there weren't that many phones. So it was Palisades was where we lived in Saguenash, it was Palisades PA5. So everybody, as I understand it, everybody in that area had a PA number, PA5 or PA4. Yeah.
It's so weird to me because now I'm like, now moving out further west, I will have moved like across the country to like 3 different states now. And I'll be like, people just can't assume that's going to be that area code. I'll still sometimes see like, well, this is just like one billboard I saw like semi-recently where there was no area code, and I'm like, oh, the company is just going to assume that people are going to do like know the area code, which like in that city, there's like only one, and like everyone knows what it is. Yeah. Actually, I remember at my daycare center job, there was this new law. I think it was like a new statewide law with like the phones and the landlines where you had to type in the area code and you couldn't not do that anymore.
That's interesting.
Yeah, what a pertinent law that just had to be passed.
Right.
But I was like,
who needs education after all?
Yeah, I was like, all this like, why don't they have
now? Interesting about the phone. So when we bought our place in northern Wisconsin in 1967, we had a party line. So that means that 2 different homes shared the same phone. So we would go on to make a phone call, and it would be the neighbor or whoever was on our party line, and we'd be like, oh, sorry, and we had to wait until they were done. How about that?
I hate that. I do love that with modern technology. Like unlimited talk, text, data is so much more prominent, and like everyone has their own phone and their own line.
Right.
I do love that.
Isn't that crazy? Like,
when did you first discover conference calls? When did that
Oh
first
my
get
God.
invented for you? That modern technology.
It hasn't yet.
Do you know that? Do you know that scene in Mean Girls where they attack her with the three-way call?
No.
So basically, they blindside her, Katie, Lindsay Lohan, and they get her to, because she's like playing the part of being a mean girl. So she's like saying stuff on purpose where it's not her truth, but she's saying it. So they call her and she doesn't know there's two other people on the line, and they like get her to say stuff so that it could be like mean to the other people who are on the line. And then Lindsay Lohan in voiceover says like, that was my first like three-way phone attack.
Well, all right, I am older, as I said, and so I was talking to my friend Anne, and she had a conference call with her siblings, and I'm like, I've never done that. She's like, here's how it works, and I was like, oh, that's good to know. So I've not been important enough for a conference call, I guess. I've never had.
I've done it a couple of times on my phone, but there have been a couple moments in my adulthood where I feel in the moment like it's so strange. So the one was at my first job out of college when one of them just said like, I don't know, like someone sent an email when like she was there, so you could have just like went up to her cube and like asked her. So she said like, oh, I love an across the office email. And she didn't say that in a mean way. It sounds like she said it in a mean way. She said it like as a joke. But I was like, oh, like I'm in the corporate world and like this is like a corporate term. Yeah. But when I recently with my HPV vaccines, when like the provider called me and they were like worried about like my primary care wasn't listed as them with my Medicaid, so they wanted to call me to like confirm stuff because they weren't sure if I'd be able to get it and get it covered. And it was a whole thing, but they said they were going to call me back. They didn't. So I called Medicaid, and then the Medicaid person put me on a conference call with that provider. And I was like, this is such a funny adult moment of me getting put on a conference call with healthcare providers. Yeah. Like, oh my God, that was so weird. That was so weird.
Your questions are interesting because they're making me think, and, you know, can I remember at this point a lot of stuff? And then when you said conference call, I was like, yeah, but it's not like I've ever been in a job where I was like, Trisha, we need your input. You know, it'd be like, no.
Because you were a woman, so they didn't see you as important.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Get used to that.
When did email get invented for you? That was like late 90s. Do you remember your first email? Because I remember Terry Bradshaw's first email in Sex and the City.
Willing Wellness, because I was always in healing.
Do you remember the first email you sent?
No, I don't. Okay. But I remember when I got speaking to my divorce again in 2006, I got my first cell phone. That I remember. 2006.
I got my first cell phone.
And you had to text, remember it was ABC.
Oh yeah.
That thing. And I was like, it was so confusing. And then I was,
well, that was just
and I told everybody, I'm like, I'm not getting a cell phone. I don't like them. And then once I got it, I was like, this thing's great. So
I got my first cell phone when I was, I think maybe 9, and it was a flip phone. I got a flip phone that I later gave to my grandma. So I was with you then.
Because, I mean, I was in your life because I met you when I came into your dad's life when you were 8. So
maybe I was 8. And then I got a phone that did the slide up to the you had to press multiple times. And then finally my brother and I got slide up phones, which it was a flip up, but it had the full keyboard, and mine was a slide up and had the full keyboard. And that was really nice. Right. And then after that, I finally got my first like smartphone, like full screen.
Well, and because of Elliot and you and Skylar being in my life, especially when we moved to the condo, like that helped me technology wise because you guys were all so adept at it, and it really made a difference. And I'm glad to say that I'm pretty skilled for my age group as far as technology goes. I think it's hugely important. You know, I'm just really grateful for that because there's people my age who are like, oh, I don't really want to do that. I'm like, you have to, because that's the world right now.
And it makes me mad because, like, of course I grew up with technology, so I would like know things, but I don't know everything. Like there are like many times recently when I'm like, I looked it up last night, how to like add text in iMovie of like on the screen. If I can't figure something out in 5 seconds, I'm Googling it. And I feel like that's the difference between younger people and older people is that older people will just accept defeat because they think like, oh, I'm old. I don't need to know technology. But younger people will be like, we know the resources are available to us, so we'll look it up and figure out how to do it. And a lot of times it's just like an easy fix. I just didn't know what to look for.
Absolutely. I mean, like YouTube for me, I don't know why everybody from my age group, especially because the videos, like it helps me so much. I don't care what it is. Even with your dad and I, we were like, look it up on YouTube, and we get then we don't have to go out and spend money. And I mean, it's great. So Googling too, I mean, that is a gift.
Yeah, I love it. When I first learned how to hook up the family Xbox to my TV in my room at the condo, I felt like a tech wizard. And really, it's just the 3 color coded cable. So it basically tells you where to put it. And then figuring out how to switch the input and the HDMI, legendary advancements in technology for my like 12-year-old self, learning what that means. Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, because it's like, wow, and now it's just second nature. You know, I mean, I don't know everything, but because of your dad, a lot of it, because he's really good at it. So if I have questions, it's like he's really helped me a lot.
And her and my dad had the same MacBook for like 8 years. Yeah. And they finally got new ones. They got M2s. I have the M3, which I wish I had gotten it a few months later when Apple dropped the price by $200 and finally made their minimum gigabytes of RAM 16 instead of 8, because 8 is ridiculous. You don't know what that means. RAM is the thing where you need a lot of it. Yeah. It's that thing that makes it more expensive, and you need at least 16 gigs. At least that's what the internet says. But I bought this computer when I didn't really need to, because I wanted it. Yeah.
Well, and my big thing with my new computer is it's midnight blue, and I love midnight blue. So.
And he got those in store, and I had to wait like 6 days for this because I wanted the starlight color. This was the only one that I wanted, and it was supposed to take 3 days. It took 6, and I was foaming at the mouth. The day of delivery, I kept refreshing the tracking. Yeah. Another thing that didn't exist when you were younger. No. But I kept refreshing it, foaming at the mouth. And I was like, finally drove to Best Buy and it got delivered. And I was like, oh my God. And I kept telling myself when I was driving there, don't get into an accident. Don't get into an accident. And I actually almost did. It was fine. But I was like, damn it. So, packages. There was no Amazon Prime. This Katya said, friend of the pod, not really, but that's Trixie's drag friend, and they do the podcast together. But she said how she ordered Cirque du Soleil, and it took like 6 to 8 weeks to get to her, the tape, when she was younger.
Yeah, I mean, and we were every summer up in northern Wisconsin, and we talk about you couldn't buy anything up there. There was nothing up there.
There was no grocery store. You had to grow it by hand.
There was one, and it was limited, but like, we couldn't buy stuff. So when Amazon came around up north, because I've been up there all my life until now, and it just transformed everything.
And it still took longer than like the cities. Like here, it's a lot faster.
Oh my God, I mean, overnight sometimes. But that was a big deal. The packages. But again, we didn't have the expectation, so it wasn't like, oh, I wish I could have the packages sooner. It was just like, if you ordered something, we went to the store. Most of the time. So if we did order something, it could take 6 weeks. It was like, okay, it takes 6 weeks. Once you start getting it immediately, then you're like, wait, where is it?
Yeah, I want it now. Yeah. And listen, we're just ordinary people. We know that Amazon is not the greatest company, as is like Walmart and like everything else. Yeah. Some things you generally cannot get in store. Like Trixie said, again, referencing her so much, she said she canceled her Amazon Prime subscription. And she said, if I want something, I'm going to go out and get it. And then Katya made the joke of like going to your locally owned mom and pop CVS to get something, because there's so many like chains and corporations. So it's not really all that different. Right. But there's so many things you can't get in person. Like when I was shopping around for a ring light and a microphone and looking at like Target and Walmart, the things in store were like not good options. Yes. I was like, Amazon is the best alternative, because they have like more stuff available.
So that's interesting, because having just moved to Asheville 2 weeks before the hurricane, by the way. So it was like, whoa. So what we've been really trying to do, I find a nice balance there. I'm not going to not do Amazon. I'm not going to not do the corporate world, because it's just too infused in our lives. But I will support the independent business when we can. Like when we go out to dinner, we try and go to independent. When we've been shopping more locally since the hurricane to support Asheville businesses so that they can get back on their feet sooner. So I find it, for me personally, that's hugely important to me to find that balance. I'm not naive enough to think that I'm not going to use it. And I love getting my stuff on Amazon. Jeff Bezos, no more giant yachts for your girlfriend though, please. Thank you.
And
how about feeding the world?
And no more going to space in your penis-shaped rocket ship, spending $30 million just to like barely go into space and deliver so much more CO2 than any one person would make in their life several times over. Like, oh my God, these billionaires are freaking out with
and
their
also,
money.
how about, you know how good feeding the world would help? It would make you feel so good. I just want you to try it. Maybe you could feed the world and educate the world instead of feeding your own egos. But that's just me.
It makes you feel good and it makes you look good. Why are these billionaires so ugly? Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, you are ugly inside and out. Your face is gross and stupid. You are ugly. It's like, so when are hot people going to be billionaires?
So this is a good piece too. Like when we say we don't like the way somebody looks, and then we meet them and they're a lovely person and they become beautiful. Same thing with beautiful people. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, she's beautiful. And then she's like,
they turn ugly.
They turn ugly. So, you know, it's just, that can be a whole other podcast. But
I talked about my third episode, the Hopeless Romantic Support Group, where I said I have an obsession with hot guys because on Instagram it's so easy. All of them are there. I can look at as many pictures as I want.
Right.
But yes, I can look at someone and think to myself, I don't want to have sex with that person. But someone is only truly ugly to me if they are ugly on the inside too. Because people can become more attractive over time if they're a nice person.
And I think there's beauty of that's a genetic thing for me. Like in my family, really finding that, like, somebody doesn't feel good at a party or somebody's insecure. Mm-hmm. I love making people feel more comfortable. And then,
I am that insecure person at the party.
I am that wallflower. At the same parties, though.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's a good thing to be able to do, to make somebody feel a little more comfortable to sit with them. And then that beauty comes out, and then you can feel the transformation. Like that, to me, that's the reason we're here. And we're not here to make money, although we need money. I'm not naive enough to think that. But, like, you know, spread the love. Be kind to the cashier. Do your thing when people are feeling shitty. Try and help them. And I know it's not going to always happen, but it feeds me. So selfishly, I like to do it because I want people to feel good, because I feel like the world is better when people feel good. And we can't all feel good when we're getting screwed over by the billionaires.
I agree. Like, I think like moving in with family, even though, I mean, there might be challenges because being an adult, living with two other adults and like we're family, there might be challenges, but at the end of the day, I will be with people I love. And when I saw a local production of Legally Blonde the musical twice, because it was so good, that was earlier this year, there really is a big theme in the musical about love that really goes throughout the entire thing.
Right.
And watching that reminded me of how important love is, and spreading it, accepting it, having love for yourself, for others. And Love Actually. I just saw an Instagram post today about how Keira Knightley said she actually doesn't like that movie because she thought it was weird that she was 17 and the other love interest she was with was like 29 or 25 or something. See,
there's a lot of
So we were about to end the podcast on a good note, and then we actually ended it on like age gaps in Hollywood. But still, love is great. Love actually is all around us, and what a great thing to bring into the new year. Yes. So thank you, Trish,
You're welcome,
for being
Ryder.
with us and sharing some stories. I love you as well.
And thank you for having me on the podcast.
Thank you to everyone at home. Thank you for Anne, an actual friend of the pod who might watch this because you might send it to her, and the other people on her Tumblr that she'll be watching, and my dad when he inevitably watches this later as my only consistent viewer. Thank you all to everyone. Yeah. And you as well.
And Happy New Year!
They watched the Maureen episode like in person when I was there, when I first got here, and they were actually laughing. It actually made me feel good. So here's more improv episodes in the future and more love all around to everyone.
Indeed, yes.
Bye.